In celebration of my newest deck release, let's put a deck edit together that focuses on the Folkloric Waters Tarot. I asked in my stories on Instagram the other day if I should put out a video featuring a deck edit for this or do a bit of an artist talk talking about my process and everything involved with this. I'm really excited that the majority of you wanted to see the deck edit first because I also really wanted to do that first as well. I am due for a deck edit swap over. So you might be wondering, what exactly is a deck edit? A deck edit to me is a group of decks that I curate to use for a set period of time. This is usually between 3 or 4 months. My last one was in May, which I'll link down below if you want to give that a watch. So I'm definitely due for a swap over, and I usually base it on a theme or a concept. It could be seasonally, it could just be a sort of title or name to the vibe that I give it. And it's always a bit of a mix and match of styles of illustration and artwork, coloring, textures, time periods and eras, and anything that fits and breathes the theme that I'm going for. So, my previous deck edit was titled Spring into Summer because it was going to be spring and summer deck edit. So, it was very vibrant with bold, luscious colors and lots of upbeat energy. Now, for these deck edits in this 3 to 4 month period, these are the only decks I'll use. So they're pulled aside off of my shelves and placed to a different shelving spot where I will select and use them. The thing that I really love about deck edits is that, one, it gives me a chance to use the decks in my collection because I'm someone who has a decent amount of decks, and this is a great way to rotate through them. It's also a really great way to just chip away at getting to know your deck and not feeling overwhelmed at the sense of the amount of decks you have, knowing that you are spending at least some small amount of time with this deck in this time frame. So with all that said, and that little bit of setup to get into this, I am going to walk you through about 14 different spreads using about 16 or 18 different decks. And I challenge myself to use Folkloric Waters in every single spread. But the beauty of doing these deck edits is that it doesn't rely on one deck or another. They can mix and match in pairings from tarot and tarot, or oracle and oracle, tarot and oracle pairings, however you want to go about it. That while these examples I am going to show feature this deck in every single one, we will touch upon some that will work fabulously together without that. So that's how I'll end up using it to move forward in these next few months for my personal practice. But for the sake of the video, we are going to go feet first into pairing this deck in my deck edit way. Now, the mood or theme that I landed on while I was selecting decks, I'm calling it Waves of Time. And I really felt like this group of decks had a lot of natural history meets historical art, but yet it's all infused with an animal and nature energy. So there's a mixture of illustration and art styles, of environments, places, and locations, of humans to animals to strictly landscapes. There's a bit of everything that I feel fits into this antique-y, nature-y, paintery reality bit. Like, it feels very physical. Like, this feels like a physical representation of the water element, but just that rough nature, that honesty, and I feel like there's a lot of things and objects and situations that lend itself to that. So, anyways, I will stop gabbing. I'm feeling a little rusty getting into this. It's been a few weeks since I've made a video, so enough with the introduction, right? Let's get right into the deck pairing, shall we? This first pairing here feels very ancestral to me. So we have the Spirit Carrier Oracle and the Folk Fortunes Oracle. This was a new one for me in July, so I haven't been able to fully play on with it, but I have been able to play with it in this sense, and I think this is a way I would really like to weave it into my readings. So because Folkloric Waters leans in this very reality-based curation of artwork, it's very everyday, it's very mundane stuff, it's average things, people, objects, you name it, that it lends itself really well to a physical representation or photography style in decks. And because the paintings are much older, bringing in these antique engraving illustrations feels like a natural connection visually and just periodically wise that ties in really simply and really flows together in a natural way. And this are things that I look for in my pairings and in my spreads. So this would be one I would definitely use for, let's say, my journaling practice, as far as working with that ancestral book I have started to work on. Haven't worked on it this month. That's why I was kind of like thinking about that. I was saying it, but this would be a great one that I would definitely use and include together. Let's just look at a couple more examples and then we will move on. If you've been around my videos for a while, you know that I kind of have a bit of a free flow style to my reading spreads. I don't necessarily use like set questions. It's a lot of in the process narrative as I go. But for all these spreads, you could totally use some pre-existing 6-card spread and just set them up in this way. There's also times that I will read in different directions and different connection points. So perhaps these two smaller oracles here would be clarifiers for the 2 tarot above it. Maybe it's more of like a wrap-up message at the end that connects to the center final tarot card. You know, is this could be your starting point, and maybe this is the build up onto this oracle that builds out and goes down, because I also really like to work in the center and then work out left to right, come back down into the center for the wrap-up message. So there's like a ton of ways to go through this in all of my spreads here. These are just ways that I visually like to set them up and work their way through. Some spreads have more of a visual purpose and meaning, and others just because I like the way it looks. Next, we have the Sacred Wood Oracle, and I think this one actually pairs better with the waters than it did with the forest. This was definitely one of my go-to pairings with Folkloric Forest. But my one thing about this Oracle deck always has been that it's so watery for it having a Woods title. So now that we actually have a water deck in the Folkloric series, I had to try these together. So a classic 3-card spread here. Use it as you may. This is just the way I like to set it up. I like the idea of the tarot card being the through line. If you want to read left to right here, this would connect the 2 oracle cards. It's that in between. Or you could use the tarot in the spread for your foundational message, for your starting point. And these 2 oracle decks are either maybe option 1, option 2, or just 2 different voices to uplift and build on this tarot meaning. So many endless ways to go about this, but I just thought these were visually a beautiful pairing. But maybe you're beyond a 3-card spread. Maybe you want to use decks. Maybe you're looking for something more complex. Let's build upon it. Okay, we're going to build this as we go. So this will be a continuation of our previous 3-card spread. We're just going to flip-flop the ordering here and have the tarot be on the edges and the oracle in the main focal point. And we'll add a new deck into the mix. We'll add the Memento Mori to it. So, how I would go about this, I would begin laying this down. So, my first card would be the center point here with the Oracle. That will be my foundation. That will be my focus. That will be what I build upon. Next, I will pull out these two tarots to begin my path 1 and path 2 options in the reading. And I'm taking in the messages. I'm reading the cards as I'm going layer by layer, row by row here. Okay. So we've got like 1, 2, but technically this is like our first pass. And then our second pass will be building with more tarot. So layer 2 here, we will just continue our story. The left hand side will be option or path 1. The right hand side is option or path 2. So at this point, I would be kind of formulating these angles or questions that each side here is going to answer for me. From there, what we get are the additional oracle cards. Once again, this is just a great way to use 4 decks in a spread, 3 or 4 decks, however many this is. I didn't go to school for math. So these objects in this oracle now will give me a bit of a leaning or a direction of where these are going to, right? It's just a different flavor added in outside of the tarot because it really can take me in a different direction. And to finalize and get like our final summary conclusion point, I would lay one last tarot here for that wrap up message. So you can see how we're starting in the top center here. We're building out to the left, we're building out to the right, and we're coming back down to here at the bottom center for the conclusion. And usually this gives me a clear indication of what side, what angle, what direction I should take, or it is taking. Sometimes these edges have very similar things to say. And then you really know, like, okay, well, I got it then, loud and clear. But there's many times that you will get opposing information. So it is a really interesting process to take in the reading. And also a really simple, straightforward way to build out beyond the 3 card spread as well. You could just stop at the 2 extra tarot cards and not get into another oracle deck and the last tarot. Like, it's very flexible. The illuminated earth meets the perfect quietness for the folkloric waters. It brings so much earthy and just natural texture and aged yet vibrant colors that allow these more pops of color to play off so nicely of these antique paintings of the waters. I am absolutely obsessed with these two. Also, the borders look fabulous together. And this would be another example where you could start off a pairing in a 3 card spread, and we can build it out to be something a little more complex. Let's just expand upon this 3 card spread here. So we'll just drop the 3 cards we just had in the same setup and everything. You could even use this as like a part 2 to your reading. Drop these down and then bring in 2 more decks here. So we have the Noisy Museum and the Mountain Dream Tarot. And I love the mix of how textural the Noisy Museum is with the Illuminated Earth. And while it's collage, it's of historical and antique imagery, which plays right back into the waters. And then the Mountain Dream here, we have some more photography-based imagery. So it almost balances these different mediums here. We have traditional painting, we have traditional painting with collage. We have a mixed media collage that's more abstract, which plays really nice into all the extra bits of the Noisy Museum. And then the photography kind of plays into all of these. So there's this stylistic push and pull as well. And once again, it's an excuse to use 4 decks. And that's really what this is for me. Like, I want to look and use my wonderful decks in my collection, and this is one way to make that happen. The best way for me to read a spread like this, I would read these in columns. I think that would be a really interesting way to go. So depending on how you want to start this, we go about it like column 1, column 2, column 3. And you could have it be that these upper cards are expanding upon your previous reading of these bottom 3 cards. If you want it to just be a new, fresh reading, you can then decide, are you just reading the 2 cards as one? Are one set of cards more of like a clarifier or expander on another set of cards? Or are you just going to read them individual questions or just individual messages, but then keep this column aspect to almost divide up and categorize the messages, right? So the 2 cards from this column sits more in this sort of area. The 2 columns in here, that, and the would be some other genre. You know what I mean? Like, so you could really go about this and break this down as much as you want, or just read all 6 cards as like one big message. I mean, it really is up to you. I am just trying to provide some ideas while we look at these deck pairings in these different spreads that I've set up. Let's look at maybe 1 or 2 more here, because I think this is like a funky one to check out. I just feel like this set of decks here, you wouldn't necessarily instantly think to pair together. And that's why I love practicing and playing with pairs, because it really opens up decks to other decks and how then they want to communicate to each other. Because I think for a lot of us, the decks can speak differently depending on the other cards that are around it. And you can see how the colors are still really playing well with one another. I'm not hand selecting these. I'm just cracking them open off screen and placing them here. It gets too messy for me to like start flipping all these piles of decks through. And it's really choose your own adventure on how you want to read these. So I'm really enjoying it. There's also potential to just pair the Illuminated Earth and the Mountain Dream, or the Noisy Museum and the Illuminated Earth, and screw the other 2. Like, this is what I mean. You can break apart these deck edits and only pair these 2 together, right? Like, you don't need any more. But I'm just trying to show some options and variety and fun. Now, this would be a spread I would purposefully use its shape and direction as a part of my reading. So I would use this as something I wanted to be challenged on. Therefore, I would work my way in this mountain shape. So while I might lay all 6 cards out like this at once, I would actually read it from bottom left, top center, bottom right in this triangle shape here to get my main message. It's basically like a start, a middle, a finish of climbing the mountain and climbing back down. And then you could think of these oracle cards here, which is the Remembering I Am Light oracle, and then we have the Altered Tarot here. So I would almost turn these into a bit of either like an affirmation or a mantra, or almost using this then inverted triangle for maybe the opposite side of whatever this message is. Maybe if this is a more challenging, difficult message, you could use this as the sort of flip, the positive or the motivational piece to take from it. Once again, it's really up to you. I really like the way that the photography is playing with the antique paintings. I think it's a natural fit to jump art styles when it comes to older paintings, classical paintings mixed with photography. So you can see how Waters easily slides into a lot of different pairings, into a lot of different spreads. Now, of course, the Altered Tarot with the Remembering I Am Light Oracle, those 2 together, amazing. Like, that is going to be a must try for me. And once again, just another reminder that all these decks can be mixed and matched amongst each other. That is why I love using and creating deck edits. It just creates this like mini shop, this mini collection that then I can pick and choose from. And it still feels like really custom every time, and not like you're using the same decks over and over, even though you only have a set of 14, 16, 18, even 8, 6. I mean, it can be whatever number you want, but just pull from there. It makes you try to be a bit more creative and step out of the box when you try your pairings. Because I mentioned it, we just need to see these in a 3-card spread, right? These 2 were absolutely meant to go together. The photography, of course, sings perfectly together, but then the edited and mirrored photography of the oracle gives this edge to the altered tarot, which I think the photography can come across less dynamic, but it's very deep. While this gives in this sort of unexpected splash of something because of the mirroring. So we're almost getting like this very reality based artwork and then that sprinkle of that fantastical, of that fantasy, which once again, if you've watched enough of my videos, you probably have a grasp that I love the juxtaposition of reality and fantasy. Like when those two can come together and kind of intermingle, that's my sweet spot. So that's definitely what I'm getting from this. Okay, I was playing with this idea while I was coming up with this deck edit and putting these spreads together. So let's just walk through this one. This is the Never Above Tarot. And I thought it would be really cool to use almost as not a spread creator, maybe more of a vibe or an archetype or some sort of enhancer. Maybe there's a word out there. I'm pretty terrible with having the official names and titles for things because I just kind of make stuff up as I go, and I've just gotten a little vibe from here and vibe from there, and I kind of just mix it together and I make something that works for me. So a lot of the times, like I'll be doing something and then years later I'll read or learn that it's something that already exists and has a name. So anyways, so what I was playing around with was pulling 3 cards from this tarot, and you could choose to take a message from here or not. Let's just say you got a mini message, right? I think it might be too much to do that, but just for the sake of explaining and trying, I mean, everything's an experiment, so it doesn't hurt to try it. So then we are going to lay down like our actual like main focus cards to read from. So then similar in a way that you can layer oracle cards or any sort of keywords with other decks, I'm using that same sort of method here. So you could then take in our little first row of tarot cards and have the Ace of Pentacles be whatever the energy for this Seven of Earth is. Like basically I was asking myself, what would the Seven of Earth be if it were an Ace of Pentacles? So then you're combining these two things into a single representation or a single archetype or a single message, just like infusing this tarot into whatever the cards on top are. It could just be a spread maker. Maybe you want to make questions based off of these tarots. That would be fun as well. It's a really open book here, but this is what I was playing with that I thought, okay, I think that could be like a really fun prompt and way to engage with the spread and the cards in a way that maybe I wouldn't normally frame. So what would the Empress be if it were the King of Wands? And maybe just another way to say that is like, what's a trait or characteristic of the King of Wands that you would apply to the Empress? What would the Six of Earth be as a Six of Swords? So this just felt like a way to almost like use as a springboard to something else as well. I didn't play with it full on out, so I don't have all the answers, but I thought it was a inkling of an idea that I thought could be really fun, especially considering that the Never Above Tarot is like a much smaller size and just fits really neatly under here. And I'm just really loving the Tarot Volatile with the Folkloric Waters. I have hardly used the Tarot Volatile because it was just in disarray, really, and it just turned me off from using it. I don't know what the edition is called for the first linen one, but that's the one I have, plus the expansion pack. And I had the vessel suit in there. I had all the extra cards, and it just felt like too much. Like I just felt overwhelmed even thinking about using it. So I pared it back down. I took out the vessels, took out the extra cards. I kept in a couple card swaps, but took out the princesses, like everything, just boiled it down to just a very 101 basic deck. And I'm really excited to pair it with these paintings because it really speaks well in a visual language way. The coloring really meets and matches. And I love how designy the Terra Volatile is to play off the simplicity of these artworks. Another 3-card spread, 2-deck pairing that I think could start out really well is just a duo that can turn into a more complex trio, perhaps, is the Remembering the Sweet Fool Tarot here. I feel like I pulled the 2 brightest cards out of the deck for this, so this might not be a great representation of this deck's overall coloring, but it does look great with this Knight of Fire, I will say that. So once again, I'm having the same reaction to the antique paintings with the photography. Even it being edited and manipulated photography, it once again, that fantastical layer, that like mysterious layer, that physical layer really speaks well, and what I like to see across the pairings with this deck. It's definitely probably one I would add 1 or 2 more decks to. Plus, with the pocket size of this tarot, I would like to layer and kind of sprinkle around, and it might not be as much as a main feature visually as it is in a 3-card spread like this. But to set us up for a bigger spread, let's look at one more 3-card spread, and then we're going to look at those decks together in one bigger. Of course, the Seashell Oracle is a no-brainer. I have seen this across Instagram, and I've absolutely been loving it. So if you have used this spread and shared it on Instagram, props to you. I absolutely adore the two, and it is a given that they need to go together. Of course, the broccoli decks backgrounds, they use the same type of source material as these paintings. So naturally, it's a perfect fit. And then I love the simplistic collage style with pieces on top of those background paintings. It really gives a little bit of an extra art push with the simplicity of the Waters paintings. And it's just a really fun duo. I love the 3 keywords on the broccoli deck. I think it's great that you can just pick one and focus on, or take all 3 if it works. And of course, thematically, it's a must. But what if we took these 2 and then the previous one with the Sweet Fool and put it together into one bigger spread? Here are those previous decks, plus bringing back in the Remembering I Am Light Oracle to create a much more complex and deeper reading here. And I really love how the Sweet Fool in this set almost feels nautical with this ship painting here. This feels, I don't know why, very sailorish for me. Same with this. So even though this deck doesn't scream water element or fit directly or literally into the theme, you can see how just visually, texturally, object-wise, that you can use your imagination and find those connection points, find those threads where it does make sense overall in the theme. And once again, it just has to make sense to you, because this making sense to me totally might not make sense to you. And that's totally fine, because each of us have to use it. Getting the repeated element of the ship and the ship here with this painting of the figure here feels very like figure greater than the ocean, the takeover of the ship. And you can see, without even reading the cards, just glancing at the artwork and seeing where those patterns and those connection points are, where we're finding something that feels similar, where we're finding something that feels like it's a connecting point for a story or a narrative, before even getting into the card message layers. This is why I love mixing and matching decks. This is why I love using spreads in this patchwork style. This is why I love deck edits. It really opens up the meanings and the readings and the messages to be so much more. Because I may have never put these cards together before, and I wouldn't have the chance to realize, like, oh, wow, the Sweet Fool does have this very physical representation of this theme that the spread is representing, even though it's literally not that. You see what I mean? Like, this is why I love doing this and talking through this and showing these examples, because I'm also learning and figuring things out too, and forcing myself to this challenge of pairing waters with every single spread I'm showing. Because if you've watched my previous deck edits, you know that I maybe use one deck one time and show another deck 3 times in these spread examples. Where this is like, I'm challenging myself to include my deck in every single spread, and I might not have necessarily paired these 4 together if that wasn't the case. But because I experimented and because I tried, I'm now discovering new things. And I really think that's a big part of this. Another example with this set here, once again, it's not matchy-matchy, and things don't have to be matchy-matchy. As I say in one of my previous deck edit videos, they just have to meet a few checkboxes for me. Like, I might have 4 checkboxes overall of how I make a deck pairing, but when I actually start pairing and putting these together in spreads, maybe they only check like 2 boxes together. But that's enough. Like, as long as it's working for you, once again, it's working. So I love how we're pulling in the textures. This is almost mimicking the water here. These almost look like a pedestal, like this rock formation down here. We've got another sort of like elevated pedestal like object here raising this up. We've got the columns raising up. We've got this reaching up for the sky, but drowning down into the water. So there's something there to play with as well visually. Once again, before we even get into the tarot meanings. So these are the ways that I look for, and it just feels like a bit of a burst of summer, like a moody summer. I feel overall this waves of time theme that I've put together with all these decks. It's moody, but it's got these like bright spots that uplift. And I feel like this combo, this mixture of styles in the decks really speaks to that hearty, that earthy, but that uplifting too. Something I love to do with my yokai decks, because this is the yokai yochi. I have the yokai tarot as well, and I love pairing that with the seashell oracle. So because the yokai yochi style is a bit more minimalistic and elevated in its limited color palette and very focused illustration style, that it felt like it was a natural fit to sing really well with the Waters deck. I love pairing the Waters type decks with my Japanese decks because Japan is an island, so it just seems to fit really well. So the Waters deck colors really allow them to pop with these muted beige and gold and grayscale tones. I think they're absolutely stunningly beautiful together. And for me, the yokai here, I would just almost disregard the yokai figures and just read tarot with it. Because I feel like sometimes trying to take in too many figures or symbols or background information that you, one, have to look up. But if you don't have to look up, I still can find it a bit overwhelming bringing in these archetypes or these more rooted and larger stories into a simple spread. So I find just reading the tarot layer and allowing the artwork to do the speaking. Here we can see this fox is looking at the ducks, which then the crow or raven here has her back turned. So like, how would you read that across together and then with the tarot meaning as well? So I feel like that already is enough to get out of a 3-card spread before you even add in the folklore layer. So then what would it look like if we wanted to expand upon the original 3-card spread? Well, let's introduce another deck and some more tarot cards. So we have the Earth Oracle here, which does a really nice job of balancing a lot of natural aspects. So there is a lot of watery and water-based imagery in here, so it plays really naturally there. And I just thought this was a beautiful mix of unexpected decks that maybe wouldn't jump first to mind to pair. Once again, you can choose how you would like to read this. I would totally probably read this in a way of my typical start in the center, build out to the sides. So these two would be my foundational message that I would build out into these left and right edges here. But you can see that the coloring and the time periods really speak beautifully together. the bits of the fantastical from the yokai here juices up the reality based of the waters and the earth oracle, since both of the imagery in both of those decks are pretty literal and straightforward, while the earth oracle has some unusual combinations and colors and things like that to make it a bit fantastical in that sense. It definitely comes across as more everyday, which I love. How about one more before we hit the last spread example? Like I mentioned with the previous sort of group that turned into a bigger spread, this just feels like it's a burst of summer. Once again, it doesn't scream, high color palette, high impact, that strong energy, but there's something that's subtle, that's quiet, that's kind of just lingers below the surface with these decks here. And it's speaking to where I am at this time period. And that's also a part of making a deck edit as well. It's like reflective and represented where you're at. And it's a great way to express yourself through it as well. It's like putting an outfit together. You're expressing yourself. Putting a deck collection, a deck edit together is expressing yourself. I just think they're really cool. Like, I'm smitten the more I look at this. Once again, it's like some of these at first glance, you're like, I'm not really sure. But then once you sit with it, flip through it, kind of think about it a bit more, you're like, no, actually, I think this is like really working. And that's a fun process too. Taking a combo of the previous Earth Oracle, Yokai Yochi, Waters, we are going to add in our final deck to the deck edit, which is the Black Lily Tarot. And I just thought the color palette, the grittiness of the illustration style, while it's definitely a bit more out there in the styles that are represented in this deck edit, I think it still mixes and blends and can kind of match in a patchwork way really well. And it just brings that edginess as well. It has that sort of fashion editorial style, which I have across a handful of my decks. I definitely love that about this deck. I love in the Hierophant that I have ducks in that card, and we have ducks in the community card here. That would have been funny if we would have pulled like the Hierophant, or it's called the Order in the Waters, as well as Temperance, which we saw previously, which is ducks too. It'd have been a very heavy duck spread. So here is another great way where this just feels like really ripe and juicy for summer, especially a late summer. The summer has been very wet, but also like moments of being very dry. So I feel like this energy here feels very passionate and hot and heavy with these pinks and reds and oranges and yellows. Then we feel like a cool down, a very soaked moment with the strong water representation in the cards here. And, how do you want to play with that in the spread? How would I read this? Once again, I would go center down and then out and down. That's just what works for me. That's how I set up a lot of these spreads. And I'll just keep saying that because this is just one way to do it and one way I see it. And just because it happens to be explaining it now to you, I could totally see it another different way next week or next month. So always open for interpretation. So we'll end on this big combo spread of these decks here. I think we've really seen a good range of decks that this edit has represented for my Waves of Time theme. It is going to be really fun to play with because these are mini decks I haven't put together specifically. Now, some clumps of them in this deck edit overall, I have either played around with or been really wanting to pair, and then this just like gave me the reason to do it. So that is it. That is my latest deck edit focused on the Folkloric Waters deck. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you found some new, fresh ideas for pairings, especially if you supported the Kickstarter to this deck or pre-orders. Thank you so much, by the way. I hope you're loving the deck, and I hope this has inspired you to find some of your own pairings in your own collection as well. This was a really great experience for me to expand and push myself in the way that I pair decks and find pairings, Just like the way the Folkloric Waters deck pushed me in the water element way, that's not something that I naturally gravitate towards. So it was a great challenge, just like this deck edit was a great challenge. So you will have to let me know what were some of your favorites, what were some of the pairings you liked. And if you have a favorite deck pairing for Folkloric Waters, do let me know in the comments down below. Even if I didn't show it in here, we all have great ideas. And you have decks that I don't have, and I have decks that you don't have. So it's always great to share. And I can't wait to hear from you. So until next time, bye.